Hi, this is Carl Leopson at the University of Arizona, and this is a video for the online students in SERP 509, the course introduction. And we're just going to take a few minutes and go through some things about the course. You can learn just about everything you need to know by going through the syllabus, but I'm going to lead you through a few other pieces. First, what the course is about. Take a look at this pie chart. This is from the fall 2014 data of the U.S. Department of Education, and it shows the categories in which all students in U.S. special education are served. And you can see that almost all of them are served in 7 categories: specific learning disabilities, speech or language impairments, other health impairments, autism, intellectual disabilities, and emotional disturbance. All of the other 6 or 7 categories only make up 7% of those special ed students combined. We're going to talk about kids with specific learning disabilities, other health impairments, autism, intellectual disabilities, and emotional disturbance. We won't spend a lot of time on speech and language impairments. Those generally aren't covered in special education courses. At the U of A, there is a whole college devoted to speech and language impairments, and they train speech pathologists. But we're going to stick with those other categories in this whole course. So during this video, we're going to review the objectives for this presentation. I'll do some introductions of myself. We'll take a quick look at course expectations, briefly review the syllabus and some of the requirements for the class. Then we'll review what we've just talked about, and we'll look at your assignments coming up. So for the objectives, the things I want you to get out of this video are ways to contact me, how to apply the course situations, particularly online. I want you to know the major graded assignments for the course. I want you to be able to locate online materials, and I want you to name for me one thing from the syllabus that interests you. All of these objectives, and every week when we have work to do, there will be objectives, and the quiz and the discussions, and there are 2 sets of quizzes. I'll explain more of that later. All the quizzes and the discussions are based on these objectives. So I'll give you objectives, I'll teach you the material, and then I'll ask you about those objectives in either a quiz or an activity or a discussion. So now let me introduce myself really quickly. I started out my career as a classroom teacher of students with emotional and behavioral disorders. That was back in the late 80s, and I taught in small areas in some of the largest districts in the country, mostly in the southeast, although also in the northeast United States. When I started working on my master's degree at the University of Kentucky, I was hired as a behavioral consultant full-time to the Scott County School District. So I ran around the district solving behavioral issues and developing behavioral interventions for kids. I learned probably more about working with people and with kids with disabilities, and particularly kids with behavior disorders, while I was working as a district-wide behavioral consultant. My master's degree at the University of Kentucky was in assistive technology and selecting assistive and adaptive devices for kids with disabilities. And that was also in the early 90s, and so those were kind of the early days for computing. I got my doctorate at the University of Kentucky. I was asked to come back there, and they were nice enough to give me a full scholarship to work on my doctorate, and worked with some of the leading people in the field and around the country. Dr. Mike Nelson, Dr. Terry Scott, among a lot of other great people. While I was at the University of Kentucky working on my doctorate, I was also a research associate with the Positive Behavioral and Intervention Support National Technical Assistance Center. More on that in a couple minutes. And I have been here at the University of Kentucky since 2001. I'm currently a fully promoted professor and the chair of the special education faculty at the University of Arizona. Love it here. Had opportunities to leave, but I'm so glad I stayed. So now let's take a look at the course expectations. I mentioned positive behavioral supports model. Can't believe this is not coming in a little more clear than this. There we go. PBIS you may have heard of. As the graphic shows, it's being implemented in over 20,000 schools in the United States and around the world. It's a three-tiered model that takes into account school-wide behavior, focusing on small groups for kids that need help in groups, and then focusing on individualized interventions. You may have also heard about responsiveness to intervention. That's the academic version of this three-tiered model. We'll talk about both of these later in the course and how they apply to kids with high incidence disabilities. One of the things you do in positive behavior support is you make sure you have expectations set up for your classroom. And I decided to model that here for you. I want you guys to PAR the course. And PAR stands for being prepared, active, and respectful. And so I'd like you to think about when you get to the discussion section today, or whenever you decide to complete the discussion for this class week, is how you can be prepared to do good work online, how you can be active in the online environment, and how you can be respectful in the online environment. I've taught this course, gosh, for about 8 years. It's changed along the way. It always goes really well. Folks are prepared, active, and respectful. I try to be prepared, active, and respectful at the same time. So, for instance, I try to be prepared by having quizzes graded when they ought to be. I try to be prepared by having materials ready when I say they're going to be ready or telling you otherwise. I try to be active by getting things graded, and I always try to be respectful in the discussion sections. So now let's take a look at the syllabus. So you should know that there are undergraduates who take this course both in class and then they come and see presentations from me. If you're an on-campus student and you'd like to do that, just let me know and we'll see if we have space in our classroom to fit you in so that you can come in for some face-to-face presentations too. I still love teaching face-to-face. It's a wonderful thing. However, I also love teaching online, and that's what we're doing for the graduate students. The course we teach for you is fully online. And a couple things I'd like you to get out of looking through the syllabus. It should be posted right now for you online. One is how to get hold of me. You can call my work phone. It rings through to my cell. I'm on email throughout the day. It pops up on my phone whenever I get an email, so I'll know when you contact me. Happy to work with you through email or phone call, either way. Always happy to set up an appointment to talk to you, so if you need to talk to me for a protracted amount of time, we can set something up in email and then have a phone call, all right? This course runs from August 22nd through December 5th, but as I'll explain to you in a couple minutes, you guys will finish a little sooner than that. There's no required text. We'll be reading from things that I assign to you at the D2L website, mostly from academic journals that are available, but also from really good sources and federal sources on IDEA and kids in special education, so from the Office of Special Education Programs. Oh, I shouldn't have clicked that button. Let's roll back down here to your syllabus. Let's look at the major course activities. So the major things that you'll be doing, you will be doing discussion sections, and there are 10 discussions assigned across the course. Each posting is worth 3 points, and I grade them based on the content, the clarity, and the grammar. And I put a lot of emphasis on grammar simply because if you're working with the public and you're working with kids and you're working with teachers and you're working with parents or other special education professionals, it's really important to have good grammar in your written communications. There are 2 types of quizzes. Okay? There are class quizzes, so you'll have a class quiz over what we're doing here right now. This is like a class. And then there is a reading, and for this week the reading is the syllabus. You'll have a quiz over each of those, so there'll be quiz questions about what we just covered in this class session, and then there'll be reading quizzes, a reading quiz on the syllabus. So there are 12 of each for a total of 24, and it's worth 70 points. I'm pretty easygoing about the quizzes. They're all short answer, and they're all directly related to the objectives and to the content. I won't ask you a question that I haven't prepared you to answer. The 2 big pieces in this course, one is the research synthesis, and that means I want you to write a short research paper based on 3 articles in APA format that's about 5 to 8 pages long. And the paper's worth 50 points, and it uses a grading rubric that focuses on grammar, content, and synthesis. I'll explain more to you about the specific requirement in a couple minutes. There's also a final exam. It's really a pretty simple exam. It's a compilation of some of the weekly quiz questions, some of them asking for a little more in-depth response than you put on earlier weekly quiz questions. There are 8 questions, and you choose 5 that you want to answer. We'll get more into that later in the semester. I'll explain it to you. I'll show it to you. I'll let you ask me questions about the final exam before I ever give it to you. Okay? So the quiz question related to what we've just talked about asks you to tell me what are the major items and what are their point values. And this little evaluation summary here should really help you answer that quiz question pretty easily. Let's take a look at one more thing, and I'll let you do this in depth yourself. This is the list of topics. We start out by doing a basic overview and the incidence of kids with high incidence disabilities and our perceptions of them. We talk about assessment and lesson planning. We talk about curriculum issues, instructional issues, placement issues, and then we start to talk about the actual specific disability areas themselves. Intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, behavior disorders, ADHD, and physical disabilities. And then we drop all that and start to talk about the cognitive and academic characteristics of students, and also their social emotional characteristics. We wind up the semester by talking about general classroom management and then positive behavioral supports and responsiveness to intervention. And then you've got the final exam at the end. Throughout, there are class quizzes and reading quizzes due each week. And for the synthesis paper, I'll be asking you along the way to give me a topic, to show me the articles that you're going to use, you're going to synthesize, to give me an outline, to give me a draft, and I expect what we'll probably do is I'll ask you to have your peers read your draft and give you feedback. One more peer review of your draft, and then the final paper is due at the end of the semester. You can see that you actually finish around November 28th, but all the materials are really due, your paper's due the 28th, but the final exam is due the 11th of December. I'll explain that in just a minute too. So what I ask you to do in the quiz associated with the schedule is to tell me one thing that you're really interested in, something that looks really interesting in this schedule. Another thing I ask you about is what looks really in the reading quiz that goes along with the syllabus is what's something in the syllabus that looks like it's going to be hard to do, and what's something that looks like it's going to be pretty easy for you to do. Just so we start to think about managing the difficulties in the course. So let's move on and talk really quick about the synthesis paper that you've got to do. What I want you to be able to do is to extend your knowledge, develop better writing skills, and I want to model good writing practices, and that's why I want you to do it in APA style and why I'm going to ask you to have peer review of it. It's worth 50 points. You select the journal articles and the topic. It's 3 articles, should be in an area of high incidence disabilities that we've been talking about in class. We'll do an outline, we'll do drafts with your peers, and then you'll present a final to me. It's about 5 to 7 pages. I grade it using a rubric. And then specifically what I want to see in terms of style is APA style, and if you need any assistance with that, I'll send you some links. I'll post them on D2L. That includes 1-inch margins all around, double spacing, 12-point type, proper citations throughout, and a proper reference list for your 3 articles at the end. Format-wise, I'll give you some examples. I'll post some that students have done previously, but typically it goes like this. You give me an introduction to a topic, you review one of the articles, you review another article, you review the 3rd article, and then you take a couple pages to synthesize those and say, here's what they had in common, here's how they're different. For instance, if I were writing a paper about, my area of specialization, which is developing interventions for kids with behavior disorders, I might write an introduction that says there are real difficulties in schools with developing interventions for kids who have behavior disorders. There are multiple models for developing interventions, and in this paper I'll take a look at articles that used 3 different models for developing interventions. And then I'd talk about the first article and what they did and what they found. That would take a couple pages, maybe a few paragraphs. Then I would review the 2nd article. Then I would review the 3rd article. And then I would take a few pages to talk about some of the things that were similar in these intervention models and some of the things that were different. And then I'd write a short summary that kind of pulls it all together and says, given what I've found, here's what I think we ought to do. Okay? It may sound like a lot now, but we're going to walk through it really carefully. And my students typically do really well on this and write some great stuff that they can use later. Now let's take a look at, I want to talk a little bit more about quizzes before we finish up, and discussion activities. So what I'm trying to do by having you do weekly quizzes is model frequent measurement. Frequent measurement is a great way to improve the learning of kids with high incidence disabilities, frankly, of any kids. So as I mentioned before, I'll always provide you with objectives. I'll cover content for those objectives in a class activity. There will be readings, discussion posts, and sometimes I'll ask you to go out and do something like implement an assessment with a kid or with another person. Then there'll be an online quiz, either a reading quiz or a class quiz that covers that material. Pretty simple, straightforward. Everybody does well on it because it's a great model to use to help people learn. Okay. The quizzes will open at the same time as the content. So if you sit down and do the content and you want to take the quiz, you can do that. They'll open on Tuesdays, which is the slated start date of each week for this class. I'll try to have everything graded by the next class after it closes. And then I leave the quizzes open so you can correct your work. So if you miss something on a quiz, you can go back and fix it. I don't have a problem with that. So for example, one of the objectives is identify a variety of methods for contacting the instructor. We covered that during the review of the syllabus. You can contact me by email, or you can get hold of me at my office number, which rings through to my cell phone, and we can set up a meeting. There'll be a quiz question that says, what is the best way to contact the instructor? You just provide the answer in a couple sentences. Okay? Simple, straightforward, to the point. You'll do well. You'll knock it out of the park. Everybody does. What I'm trying to do for you is model great instruction, or at least good instruction, for as we could organize it for kids with disabilities so that they have high levels of success. And I want you to see what it feels like. So here is a special issue for you as graduate students. Because this class is also taken by undergraduate students who meet face-to-face, during the first week, students who meet in the face-to-face class, they will start to get the content, and they have to do the class 2 reading quiz and discussion by the start of week 2. To open it up for everybody at the same time and to get us all on the same time frame, I need to have you guys take class 1 content quizzes and reading quizzes and class 2 content and reading quizzes all during week 1. I don't think you'll find this very hard. It's not a ton of work. One of the nice things about that is that you end up being done a week early. That's why you finish all the work on November 28th. All the in-class undergraduate students don't finish until the following week. But you should have that all done by November 28th. If this becomes confusing, and I don't think it will, send me an email. I'll try to remind you online exactly what's due on what day and what's due for the next week. But for now, for you, before next Tuesday, right, before the second week of class starts, I would like you to do class 1 reading content quiz or Class 1 quiz, the Class 1 reading quiz, the Class 2 content quiz, and the Class 2 reading quiz, and there's a little Class 2 activity to do for discussion also. Okay. Get all that done and you will be rolling. And we won't double up anything else during the semester. Well, that is it. Let's do a quick review. So one thing I wanted you to be able to do would to identify a variety of methods for contacting me. We talked about that and how you can get a hold of me by email or through my office phone number. When given a situation, apply the course expectations. I'll ask you in a discussion post to apply those par the course expectations to your online class experience. Okay? How can you be prepared, active, and respectful in this online environment? The next one was name the major graded assignments for the course, and what I'd like you to do is tell me what the graded assignments are and what they're worth. We talked about locating online materials. All of the readings for this course are available online at D2L. There's no required text. And then I'd like you to take a look through the list of topics on the syllabus and name one topic from the syllabus that really interests you. That helps me focus a little extra attention on those topics for those of you who have special interests. So that's it. I look forward to teaching the course. I look forward to seeing your posts online and getting to know a little bit about you. There is a discussion post for the first week that also asks you to introduce yourself. Love it if you do so. It's great for me to have a little more info about who you are. It helps me tailor some of my responses to you. So if I know what you do and who you are, I can use examples from your walk of life to help you understand what we're doing in class. Okay? Great. If you have any questions, remember, send me an email, give me a phone call. See you online. Bye-bye.